Hilchos Pesulei Hamukdashin Perek Chamishi, the laws of the disqualified consecrated entities, chapter 5. This chapter mirrors yesterday's chapter, except that it talks about money, which means yesterday we were talking about actual sacrifices, where you have a chatas, you have a sin offering, which if something happens to it, instead of being offered, it has to die. In other cases, instead of dying, it has to be left to graze in the pasture till it develops a blemish, and then you take the money. You sell it, you take the money, and you give it either to a donation or you bring another sacrifice. We also saw about the asham, that sometimes it also has to be left to graze. Today, it's the equivalent of all those things, just with money. A person set aside money for a sin offering. Whatever circumstances cause the chatas to die, cause the money to be destroyed. Whatever circumstance caused the chatas to be left to graze and be sold, the money also has to be exchanged and go to donation, etc. As we're going to see all the cases specifically, basically mirroring yesterday's chapter. It says that Rambam Malacha Aleph, Hamafrish Mois Lechatasa Iva Meis. A person sets aside money for his sin offering and then he dies. So the same way, when it comes to a regular animal, we said yesterday, Chatas Shemesu Be'aleha. If the owner of a sin offering dies, the chatas has to die. So the money also has to die. How do you die money? The money needs to go to the Dead Sea. You just throw it in there and let it rust. Similarly, if a person would separate money for his chatas, and then they got lost, and he ends up bringing a different sin offering in their place, he didn't use that money, and after atonement, he finds the original money. So the same way when it came yesterday to the actual chatas, one of the 4 chatos that die is the chatas whose owner used a different sin offering. So here too, if you had money and you ended up using a different sin offering, the money is to be destroyed. Halacha beis, hifrish mois lechatase va'avdu v'hifrish mois acheres tachtein. Here is a person with these 2 piles of coins. He first put aside this pile of coins. This is going to be for my chatas. That pile of coins got lost. He puts aside another pile of coins. He didn't even have a chance to buy his sin offering, and then he found the original money. So now what do? Similar to what you do when you have 2 animals. Take the money combined. Use the combined proceeds to buy a chatas, and the rest of whatever money remains should go to the donation. There was these boxes in the Beis Hamikdash that had, if you put money in there, they would bring just donation sacrifices. That's what it means. You go to the Nedava. Halacha Gimel, Hifrish Mois Lechatasa Va'avdu. The scenario begins the same. You set aside money for your chatas, they got lost. But now, V'hifrish Chatas Tachteyan. You already put aside an animal to bring instead of the money. You didn't have a chance to bring it by the time you found the original money. And the sin offering at this point got a blemish. See the band-aids on the leg? It got a blemish. So you have 2 issues. You found your original money. The animal you put aside for now cannot be brought on the mizbeach. It has a mum. Timacher. Sell the animal. Now you're going to have 2 piles of money. And it goes back to the other case of 2 piles of money. You bring the combined proceeds, buy a carbon chatas, and the rest goes as a donation. Halacha dalet, the exact same thing in the opposite scenario. Not you put aside money first and then an animal, but first the animal. Hifrish chatasa iva avda. We'll switch it on the screen. You put first aside the animal as a chatas, the animal got lost. V'hifrish mois tachta, then you set aside money, because you're like, hey, my animal's lost, I'll put aside some money. But you didn't have a chance to use them to buy any chatas, and you found your original one, with a blemish now. Same thing. Timacher, sell the animal. Bring the combined proceeds. Buy a sin offering, and the rest goes to donation. What if to begin with, you put aside 2 piles of money? Not you put aside a pile of money and once that one got lost, you put aside a second one. To begin with, you weren't sure what's going to happen to your money. It's like, you know what, I'll make 2 piles, just for confidence. You can use one of them, the other one must go for donation because you attach to it some level of sanctity. Halacha vav, hamafrish chatasai dmei chatasai. A person puts aside either an animal or money. V'kisavar shehu chayav, only because he thought he was obligated to bring a sacrifice. He was under the impression that he did a sin, which has to bring a chatas for. But then, v'nimtza she'ein chayav. It turns out he's not even obligated. So in both of these scenarios, whether it's an animal or money, it doesn't even become holy at all, because you were under a false pretense. If you put aside two animals, or the money of two animals, and here you thought you were obligated to bring two sacrifices, then it turns out you're only obligated to bring one. Here it's a little bit more complicated, because since you're obligated to bring one, you don't know which one of the two became holy. So we have to assume both of them became holy. And therefore, yavi achas v'ashar yipol l'ndava. Bring only one, that's what you're obligated, but the rest go to donation. Halacha zayin halakeach mois biyadai. A person picks up, or he's gathering money with his hand, a bunch of money. Or he was in the process of collecting. He doesn't have them in his hand, he's in the middle of picking them up. And he said, Eilu avi mehem chatasi. This cash, I'm going to bring my sin offering from it. Now, he looks into his hand, he has 400 gold coins. That's not what it costs to bring a sin offering. There's going to be leftover money. Hamoiser chulin. Says the Rambam, any leftover, he never meant to make holy. It's completely mundane. And it seems to me as well, says the Rambam, if a chatas, which is always the most sanctity, the most strict, this law would apply, then for any other sacrifice, for sure, leftover money is chulin. Person picks up a bunch of bills, like, you know what, I'm going to bring my burnt offering from this. And then he has leftover cash, it's all chulin. Halacha ches, hamafrish mois leminchas chayte. A person puts aside money for the mincha of a sinner. The mincha of a sinner is one of those cases, what's called a fluctuating sacrifice. There are certain sins that if you do them, ideally, if you can afford it, you have to bring an animal. If you can't afford it, you can bring birds. If you can't afford that, you can bring flour. Okay? So he was in a situation where he didn't even have enough money for the bird, he's bringing flour. He puts aside money for the flour. And then he brings the actual mincha. Or he puts aside the actual flour. And there's extra in the end. In both of these scenarios, whatever's left over should be brought for something holy. At least a voluntary flour offering. But whatever is left over of the flour used by the high priest every day, the chavit in the pancake sacrifices, should be left to rot. That has too much holiness, it can't even be brought as a donation. Also, if there's leftover breads from the Thanksgiving offering or a Nazarite's offering, they both bring bread. Taida has 40 breads, Nazir has 20 breads. They should be left to rot. If there's leftover money from the libations, the accompanying parts, the flour, the wine, the oil, those go to donation. Says the Rambam. We already explained in the laws of the half shekel when we were talking about the 13 boxes that were in the temple, where you would put out, there was 6 of the 13, or 7 of the 13, were for specific funds. The last 3, if you see over here, they're all for moisar, leftovers. So we already explained, says the Rambam, Shem moisar ashkalim chulin. Any leftover money from the half shekel is chulin. You pick up a bunch of money, you're like, you know what, this is going to be my half shekel coin. And it turns out it equals to more than a half shekel. Whatever is more is mundane. Moisar kinei zavim, kinei zavais, kinei yildes, chatois va'ashamais. We also explained that the leftover money that a person put aside, if he was a zav, it's a man with an abnormal discharge, or a zava, a woman with an abnormal discharge, or a yeledes, a woman who gives birth, they all have to bring pairs of birds. If they put aside money and they have leftover money, chatayis va'ashamais, also if you have leftover from a sin offering or a guilt offering, whatever is left over goes to the donation boxes. You see here it says, moisar chatas, moisar asha, moisar kinim, moisar nazir, all these things. They go into these boxes, and the money that's taken out of them is brought as burnt offerings, as we explained. Moisar oila la'oila. If a person has leftover money from a burnt offering, it should go towards a burnt offering. Moisar shlamim l'shlamim. Leftover peace offerings go to peace offerings. Moisar mincha lemincha. Leftover flour offerings, meaning money, should go towards flour offerings. Moisar pesach l'shlamim. Leftover money from a Passover sacrifice should go to peace offerings, because actually Pesach and shlamim are treated the same throughout the rest of the year. Moisar nezirim l'nezirim. If a person had put aside money to help Nazarites, it should go towards Nazarites. He has extra money. Moisar Nazir lo Oisei Nazir. If an individual Nazir has extra money from his sacrifice, it should go to that Nazir, to him. Says the Rambam, when do I say that leftover money put aside for a sin offering goes to donation bechatos kvua if it was the standard sin offering? Aval mishu chayav bekarban oile v'yoded. Going back to the fluctuating sacrifice, a person was obligated towards paying for a fluctuating sacrifice. That means if he's richer, he should bring an animal. If he's poorer, he should bring a bird. If he's even poorer, he should bring flour. So consider this. A person is chayav ba'ila v'yodet, shehifrish mois lechatas behema v'heni. He puts aside money for an animal. He was rich. He could afford an animal. And then he becomes poor. Stock market goes down, loses a bunch of money. Now he looks in his account, doesn't have enough money for an animal. Maybe tachteyem oif. So here, the leftover money, so to speak, you should bring it as a bird. Umechalon ala oif. Transfer the holiness of the money to the bird. V'yehona me'am, and you can use the money. The money is completely unholy. Next scenario, a person was rich enough to put aside for a bird. Stock market goes down. Now, he only has enough money for flour. So instead of taking the money and making it half holy, half not, you simply bring a tenth of an ephah of flour, transfer the holiness of the money to the flour, and enjoy the money. The money is yours, not holy at all. You put aside an animal, same scenario, okay? The fluctuating sacrifice. Puts aside an animal, now he becomes poor, it gets a mum, gets a blemish. Timocher v'yavi b'dameh ha'oif. You can sell it and bring, with the money, bring a bird. Avalim hifrish oif v'nifsal, but if you put aside a bird, and the bird became disqualified, lo yavi b'dameh v'asiris ha'efa, you cannot redeem it and bring with the money the flour, she'ein la'oif pidyon k'meshu b'arno b'yisuri ha'mizbeach. As we saw in the laws of forbidden entities in the Mizbeach, once a bird becomes holy, it can never be redeemed. So an animal can be redeemed to a bird, but not a bird to flour. Halacha Yud Aleph, kol chayavi kinin shebatayra. All those in the Torah who are obligated to bring pairs of birds. Shehifrishu mois likinehem. We're going to be dealing with pairs of birds at length, actually, for almost 4 chapters. There's a whole tractate in the Talmud called Kinim, which means pairs. It's the shortest tractate in the entire Talmud, only 15 Mishnahs. There's pairs, yeah. Ken is like a nest. So it's used in the Talmud for pairs of birds. It's a tiny tractate. It's just 4 pages of Talmud, and it has commentaries to the moon. The Mishnahs are so cryptic, so hard to understand, and we're going to be dealing with chapter 7, 8, 9, and 10 of these laws is a reflection of that tractate. So the Rambam is kind of setting us up for it already now a little bit. All those who are obligated to bring pairs of birds, shehifrishu mois lekinen, if they put aside money for their pair, ratza lahavi b'chal hamois chatas ha'oif levada yavi. If you want to use all the money towards the sin offering bird, you can use it. Ratza lahavi b'hen oilas ha'oif levada yavi. If you want to bring only a burnt offering, you could bring it. Most pairs of birds were either both burnt offerings or one burnt offering, one sin offering. But if you want, since you only put aside money, you can use it for whatever you want. Afilu amar, even if you said, originally, when you put aside the money, even if you said, Elud me chatasi, ve'elud me elasi, 2 piles of money, this is the money towards my sin offering bird, this is for the burnt offering bird, yesh le le'arev hamois, ve'likach bahen ke'echad chatase ve'elase. You can mix up the money and just buy everything together, your sin offering and your burnt offering, oy likach ba'koel chatos, oy oilar, to use it all towards sin offering, all towards a burnt offering, she'ein hakinin misparshes, ela bilekichas habaylim, oy ba'asiyas kohen. There's a special law by birds. Birds only assume their designation when the owner actually buys the birds, or even later when he brings it to the temple and the Kohen does the performing service. In other words, you could walk into the temple with a pair of birds and you don't yet know which is the burnt offering, which is the sin offering. When the Kohen will perform the procedures, he'll decide. But money means nothing. Unlike when it comes to a sacrifice of an animal. Putting aside money already gives it holiness, not so for a bird. Lefichach, therefore, im hiflish mois lekinin stam b'meis. A person puts aside money just for a pair of bird, with no stipulation, and he dies. Yiplu kol oisan hamois hastumin lindava, shahare kulan ru'uyin lava ela. Everything goes to donation, because everything could have been brought as a burnt offering. Halacha Yud Gimel, Misha Yomuchuyev Chatos. If somebody was obligated to bring a sin offering, the Amar, and he said, Harei olai oila, I'm taking upon myself a burnt offering. So now 2 things happened. He did a sin, which holds him accountable to bring a sin offering. He also promises to bring a burnt offering. V'hifrish ma'is v'amar elu l'chayvasi. He puts aside money, and all he says is, this is for my obligation. Now, 1 second. You have two obligations. You have an obligation to bring a sin offering, and you also promise to bring a burnt offering. It says that Rambam, you can do whatever you want. You want to bring it, use it for the sin offering, use it. Burnt offering, use it. If you died and left over the money, now we can't do anything. Because it could be this, could be that. And so like in the first case of this chapter, you must destroy the money, bring him to the Dead Sea.